Hi, my name is Johnston Blakley with Investigative Training. Today I'm going to talk to you about two cameras, one that I have been using for some time and one that I just purchased and that I'm actually filming myself on right now, which is called the Panasonic HCV700M, and I'm pitting that up against the Panasonic TM60, which is very much like the TM55 and SD60. It's a couple generations back, and we're going to be looking at a few different features with it, and I'm going to show them to you right now. Alright, this is the low light test. I have both cameras on automatic mode, so we'll see which one sees more detail in low light and which one has less noise in low light. Already I'm seeing on this camera here, the TM60, I see a lot of noise to the right of the mirror, or both left and right of the mirror. Alright, and what I mean by video noise is all those little moving speckles that you see, particularly when a camera is recording in a dark area, and these two cameras are quite different. The 700 is very smooth. All the dark colors are very smooth. There's very little noise to be detected, whereas the TM60 and 55 are very noisy. And what you might see here in this side-by-side illustration, you see more detail in the TM60. That's because the gamma is boosted up and it's causing all this noise that you see. But in fact, if you were to lower the exposure or control the exposure of the TM60, where it wouldn't have all these noise, the speckliness, it would actually be darker than the HCV700. Okay, here's a very, very dark hallway. Pitch black. And we're going from a light room to a dark room. Alright, the TM60 is a little bit more telephoto, so we're going to bump up the 700 a little to try to equal that. And the reason for this is the 700 starts much wider angle, and so even though it's 21x zoom, it's 21 times 28 millimeters. So the most telephoto that you get from it is 717.40 millimeters, whereas the TM60 and 55 is 25x. So it starts a little narrower, a little bit more telephoto, and that equals 35.7 at its widest. At its longest, it's 892.5 millimeters, and that's quite a difference in telephoto strength based just on the optical zoom. But later on I'm going to tell you a little bit about the digital zoom qualities of these cameras. We're going to go out into a little bit more light. Obviously the white balance on both cameras is taking a while there. Alright, let's try another mode. Alright, both cameras are in color night mode. It slows the shutter speed way down. As you see, as I'm walking here, you get a lot of motion blur, even though this is in wide angle. Now let's go into a very dark room here, extremely dark, and you can see that we're still picking up everything as though there's light in the room. Let's go to a very dark corner of the room. closet. Inside the closet, you can see better with the cameras than with the naked eye. Let's see how it handles a moderately lit room. See, when it comes into light, far less motion blur. Okay, let's zoom in. First with the 60 and then with the 700. Probably a little too much with the 700. Alright, you just saw a setting that both of these cameras have. It's what's called color night mode. And what it basically is it's not like Sony with the night shot. Well, not exactly Sony night shot. It does have a little bit of this. But it slows the shutter speed way down, and that's what causes that motion blur. I also believe that it boosts the gain a little bit too. Out of that little competition there, I do believe that the 700 was better. There's a little less motion blur and it grabs the focus a little bit quicker. I have been noticing this with various tests I've been doing, that the 700, despite having a larger sensor, is a little bit quicker with the focus. And so let's move on to a resolution test. Okay, here's the TM60. I'm going to zoom in to, there's 80x. So we'll jump in on the zoom here. 100. There's 150. There's 300. Here's 100x on the Panasonic 700. Here's 180x. It's getting to the point where it looks a little unusable and the heat shimmer is very bad from the road. I'll put it at 300x. Pretty much unusable when you're filming over top of asphalt. Alright, so let's do a resolution test here. I'm trying to keep both cameras on the same telephoto setting. Obviously one I have to boost up a little to equal the other, but let's roll this here, and zooming in post, which means on my computer, and we're going to see who falls apart the first. Now here I'm looking at the 700 with better contrast and slightly more sharp than the TM60, even though, and this is the strange thing about this new camera, the HCV700 and 700M, M meaning a version that has memory built in as well as the SD card, even though it has much wider. In fact, the TM60 and TM55 at 25x, the equivalent X in the 700 would actually, instead of 21, I'm thinking be around 17 or 18x. But much different in the digital, in the quality of the digital zoom. And I believe the 700 here has 46 intelligent zoom, meaning you go up to 46x and it holds it together in a very good way with sharpening and added contrast and stuff. And I think it actually does a much better job. I'm not a big fan of digital zoom, but I much prefer having all that taken care of optically. But obviously in whatever process they do to do this, as well as I think the larger sensor size, which is twice the size, the 700 is a 1/2 inch sensor and the TM1655 is a 1/4 inch sensor. So usually inherently that means better in low light, less noise, and I'm wondering here if that also means that you can go, the resolution is better. So it's very interesting, the results of this, but let's move on. Alright, let's look at zoom speed here, and there is no comparison. The 700 smokes it. You can, boom, zoom right in on someone quick and right back. The TM1655, they are pathetically slow, and I noticed that as a weakness of the camera that I've just lived with. But, and not only that, but with the faster focus of the of the 700, despite the faster zoom, it still locks onto focus very quickly. So let's look at some stabilizer tests. Let's start off here. 700 is on the left, 60 is on the right, and this is a seated position. Okay, and there's an additional stabilizer on the 700 that locks it down a little bit more. I noticed just a little bit of benefit to that. When you have your elbows on your armrest, your cameras like that, it locks it down a bit more. Now, having said that, there's a difference between these stabilizers that I have not demonstrated here, as it's a little hard to demonstrate at times. And I've used Canon cameras that have the same kind of optical stabilizer, and it does this even more than the Panasonic. But sometimes when you lock your elbows right down, press the camera against your face to make more points of contact, when you zoom out a bit, the cameras perceive that as being on a tripod, and it will shut the stabilizer down, and it'll just go crazy, your stabilizer. It'll like shoot over to the right or up, down. And this 660 TM55 does that. Not as bad as some of the Canons that I've tried, but the 700 doesn't do that, and I have not gotten it to do that yet, no matter how steady I hold the camera. And there's a button right where your left thumb is that adds an additional lockdown stabilizer. I think it's a digital stabilizer that goes on top of the optical stabilizer, and you don't really notice that much difference when you're sitting down locked in, but this next demonstration will show you a little bit more the difference in these two stabilizers. The TM60 and 55 has a 4-axis stabilizer. The 700 has a 5-axis stabilizer plus an additional hybrid stabilizer is what they call it. So let's take a look. Yeah, these two shots here are both from a standing position. The 700 is a little bit smoother. There is movement. Now here's the lockdown on the 700. It keeps the larger movements a little bit smaller. And I don't know if also you noticed in that shot, but the highlights on some of the roofs that we shot in the TM60, they were blown right out, whereas the 700 kept the shots right in. So I'm still testing the 700 out against some of the other options. I really want badly to test the Canon, I believe it's R32. I'll look that up and I'll put it on the site below the video, because one of the weaknesses I notice with this camera is it goes right into that low light feature that is very, very low light. It's very good as long as you don't zoom out too much, but I wish there was more steps. depending on the level of light. And I've noticed that Canon does have that, and so if I can get a hold of that the Canon 32, I will test it, and I'll see if I can put that up against both of these cameras. So there you go. I'm Johnston Blakley with Investigative Training.